In 1996, I received a telephone call out of the blue. It was a man calling himself Tony. He said his employer would like a copy of a documentary I'd made about the Holocaust. I said, "Who's your employer?" He said, "I can't tell you." I said, "Oh, go on." He said, "OK, it's Stanley Kubrick." It was a huge surprise. By 1996, Kubrick had become, in the public's eyes, a reclusive, mythical figure, never appearing in public and hardly ever releasing films, although it hadn't always been that way. In the 1950s and 60s, he produced one brilliant film every few years. It was an amazing track record. These were masterpieces, classics that changed the way we looked at cinema. He was the most important and mysterious director in the world. But then the gaps between releases of new films got longer and longer. What was he doing? I sent the tape and waited for something amazing to happen, for an invitation to the Kubrick house or something. But something else happened. Just as he finished editing Eyes Wide Shut, his first film in 12 years, he died. It's a few years later. Unexpectedly, Tony, Kubrick's assistant, phones again, and suddenly I get the invitation to the Kubrick house near St. Albans. Tony had been reading one of my books and he remembered our phone call from years before, and so we thought it might be nice to invite me up for a bit of a tour.
We've got the builders in at the moment.
How long have they been here?
A couple of years, longer. Place needed a lot of work doing to it. Home improvements, as you may imagine, were not high on Stanley's list of priorities. This is one of our porter cabins, full of stuff. Let me put the lights on.
Stanley Kubrick's house is, amazingly, full of boxes. There are boxes everywhere. How many boxes would you say there are in total?
I really can't say. I mean, clearly over 1,000. Yeah, but I wouldn't know, because they're all over the place.
Where are they?
Oh, everywhere in the house. I mean, half the house was filled with boxes and trunks.
Tony and Jan say that some of these boxes haven't been opened for decades. I adore Kubrick's films and I find him so mysterious. I would love to be the first person to look through them. I asked the family, and they say yes.
It's relics, isn't it? It's something very strange that is left over. This person has touched that. So I can only imagine that if you're a total film fan, that then the boxes attain that level.
I do sense that there's some concern about what I might do with what I find.
That's what worries me, that people pick up a fact or a group of facts and run away with them and build this Frankenstein out of it, you know, which is tough for us and wrong, inaccurate.
I start randomly in a porter cabin with a box marked Islington, which is where I live. This is my video shop. This is my dry cleaners. These are doorways in my neighbourhood, and this is what someone's written on them.
All of these archive boxes here are mainly photographic research for Eyes Wide Shut. Everything from doorways to street scenes, cafes. And apartment interiors.
It's like the whole of London is in this
Yeah.
cabin.
I mean, there's a whole box there full of gates, you know, estate gates.
For one scene in
For
Eyes
one
Wide Shut.
scene, yeah.
Did you do this on all the films?
Yeah, yeah.
Who were the photographers?
I think most of the London stuff was done by Manuel Harlan, Jan's son. In fact, you can see there it says Manuel, AWS, Eyes Wide Shut.
So how many photographs did you take?
I don't know. I can't remember. 30,000? Was it, I think, again, was a number I arrived at once?
So how long were you traipsing through London for?
A year.
Really, a year, every day?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Did you feel like it was a good year?
Yeah, I thought it was a great year, actually. Originally, I was just going to do some stately homes, and then suddenly I found myself looking for coffee shops, and then doorways that could be, you know, the hooker's doorway where Tom meets the prostitute.
And you took some hooker doorway photographs on my street, which I thought was both exciting but also a bit of a kick in the teeth.
Oh, really? Stanley was always keen on getting sort of the sort of detritus of people's lives. So he loved me sort of getting sort of bedside tables with sort of, you know, drying socks and a radio alarm clock and a sort of a Mickey Mouse light or something like that. And he'd say, no art department would ever make this. You know, it's so bizarre that you'd never think of it.
You shot a lot of toy shops as well.
Yeah, toy shops, mortuaries. Oh, costume places. That was a really long job, actually. I was in every costume shop in the southeast of England.
And did he look at them all?
All, with tremendous excitement. There was a time when I would get, you know, 3 or 4 phone calls a day saying, you know, what are you doing? Have you found anything good yet? And, you know, what's this place like? And he had such a charisma that you wanted to please him.
Would he not be overwhelmed by the amount of things he'd have to then look through?
No. I would say he was rarely overwhelmed.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it is true that he was an impatient man, but immensely patient with his work. He had a particular gift, I think, that was a real gift, in that most people, if they work very constantly, the doors have to be closed, everything has to be quiet, and he could be interrupted all the time. He would immediately go back to whatever it was. He would refocus very quickly within a second.
Well, there was one time when he wanted me to shoot the whole of Commercial Road, from one end of the street to the other. I mean, it's not a short street, but he didn't want the buildings to tilt forward or back. So I had to take a big ladder with my camera, and it's this huge ladder that it was about, 12 foot high, this ladder. And I had to climb to the top of the ladder, shoot a shot front, move the ladder on 12 feet, climb it again, shoot another shot front, and then eventually be able to, stick together with sellotape a long, sort of literally 6 meter row photographs. And he was trying to say, well, how soon can you get here? Come right away. And so I drove straight back, having spent an hour in Snappy Snaps just waiting and saying, well, they're ready.
After Manuel got his photos developed, he went home and sellotaped them all together so they'd create a perfect panorama of the whole of Commercial Road. Then he took the roll back to the mansion where Stanley Kubrick was waiting with his art director, Roy Walker.
And he came in with Roy Roy, sure beats going there, doesn't it? And Roy said, "Oh, Stanley, you're going to have to go eventually."
Listen, no one will bother us. It's okay, come on. Come on.
This is the hooker doorway scene from Eyes Wide Shut. It was eventually shot on a set at Pinewood. A random search of 1,000 boxes can drive someone crazy, though I try more chronological about it. Although there isn't much from the early days when Kubrick was making a film every few years. Just things like some old film cans of screen tests from long ago. Inevitably, the boxes are mainly filled with things from the later years, from 2001: A Space Odyssey onwards, when there were the ever-lengthening gaps between films. These boxes tell a lot of stories, but mainly they tell the stories of the gaps.
2001 was a watershed. Prior to that was just the way films may go on location to Spain, you know, for a Spartacus or Paths of Glory, make those films without doing much more than everybody else was doing at that stage. But it was post-2001 that Stanley then began to get involved in everything that went on.
Stanley had a tough time keeping up with himself. Sort of Catherine wheel of ideas and projects and things to do and so on. These memos date back to '68 when we were doing 2001. Please see that there is a supply of melons kept in the house at all times. Do not let the number go below 3 without buying some more. Thanks, Stanley. By their memos you shall know them. Please check with the Weather Bureau and find out what the barometric pressure in London was last Friday, 11th of October, between 6 p.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning. Also, find out what the average barometric pressure is on most days of the year, what is considered extremely high and what is considered extremely low, and how they would describe the pressure on Friday, the 11th of October, during the times I mentioned. God knows what that was about. I mean...
He doesn't say why he wants to know.
No. No, I mean, you know, things are done strictly on a need-to-know basis, you know. We used to come in the morning, I mean, we're standing up all night writing memos. I mean, where does he find the time, you know?
And then there were the fan letters. Even though Kubrick rarely wrote back to his fans, the fan letters are perfectly preserved. The way they've been filed is extraordinary. Kubrick has written FP on the positive ones, FN on the negative ones. The ones from Albuquerque have been put in the file marked Albuquerque, and so on. On the crazy letters, Kubrick has written crank.
Why did you keep a crank file?
Just in case somebody suddenly sprung out of the woodwork and did something. I mean, we'd have a record of who they were.
So if he was ever assassinated, the police would have a list of suspects?
Well, they would certainly have the crank files. We had general crank files, and we had crank letters broken up by film as well.
Why?
It was more orderly.
Orderly?
More orderly, yeah. I mean, logical.
Dear Stanley Kubrick, I can no longer resist what I hope is a brotherly urge to write to you. It baffles and infuriates me how anyone of your talent can be so perverse or incompetent or cowardly or blind or whatever the hell it is. But the fact of the matter...
I wondered what would drive someone to write a crank letter to Stanley Kubrick, which is why I've come to see the author of one. It turns out that Vincent was no ordinary crank. He He was a successful TV scriptwriter and a great Kubrick fan. Everything was okay in Vincent's life until the day London Weekend Television commissioned him to write a 1-hour, 50-minute drama called The Death of Adolf Hitler.
More and more came to me, but I thought it will be so good when they get it, that when they see that they're 1 hour, 50 minutes, in fact, round about 6 hours, they will think that, but this is just wonderful.
This was 1973. Kubrick's films were changing cinema and the way people wrote films back then, which is why Vincent felt so inspired to deliver his 6-hour Death of Adolf Hitler.
But they brought it down to 1 hour, 50 minutes. And all the bits they had cut out were the bits that I wrote with my heart. It was like cardboard.
We wouldn't be in this mess now if it wasn't for you. You have betrayed the party. You have betrayed Germany. You have betrayed me. Thank you, gentlemen.
The Death of Adolf Hitler is similar to, but definitely not as good as, Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove.
When they go down into the mine, everyone will still be alive. There will be no shocking memories, and the prevailing motion will be one of nostalgia for those left behind, combined with a spirit of bold curiosity for the adventure ahead.
They had reduced it to a very mediocre little thing. And it seemed incredibly unjust to me. I should be up in the ranks with Kubrick, and I wasn't, and it wasn't my fault. I'd got and all that, yeah. I remember the night that I actually saw The Death of Adolf Hitler on television. I put a coat on, got a bottle of scotch, went out in the garden, under the stars, freezing, and drank the bottle of scotch. And I thought, that's the end, that's the end.
It was when Vincent got back inside from his garden that he wrote the crank letter to Stanley Kubrick.
Dear Stanley Kubrick, I can no longer resist what I hope is a brotherly urge to write to you.
Vincent's letter to Kubrick is very long. He tells him that 2001 was a grave disappointment to him, and he explains why in enormous detail.
And now here's this for patronising. I rarely write to strangers. If you find this letter offensive, consider how very few people I find worth offending. I just want you to do better. I must have been thinking to myself that I should be in the Kubrick League anyway. If they'd done my play properly, I would be up in that league. So I'm going to get up in that league by being up there and talking to him down here. That is desperation.
And he saw it as a crank letter.
Yes, well, that's what he wrote at the top, wasn't it? Crank. Yeah.
After the death of Adolf Hitler, Vincent had one more go. He tried to write The Birth of Jesus Christ.
And I spent the next 2 years. I don't think I ever got past page 3 or 4, and it was drivel. That was 2.5 years output. It was 3 pages of drivel.
So you just wrote and rewrote the first 3 pages of the script?
Yeah.
You were like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. He's in a room writing over and over again, and then eventually his wife reads what he's written for all those months, and it's just the same line.
Yeah.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, over and over again.
Not far off that, it was, yeah.
Golly.
Yeah, golly.
I start coming to the Kubrick house about once a month to look through the boxes, although it's hard because they keep getting rearranged. There might be no more films to make, but there are box sets and retrospectives to oversee. I think about Vincent the crank writer as I look through the boxes. He abandoned his artistic ambitions to become a psychotherapist. He felt that imperfect people in an imperfect industry had damaged his work. The boxes show that Kubrick was forever guarding against the same thing happening to him, even if that meant him going to tremendous lengths, like measuring all the newspaper ads to make sure he was getting his money's worth.
There was one incident where he thought an ad in Germany had been smaller than the ad we had reserved. So we measured the ads.
Really?
It was a few millimetres short.
How did he notice the missing millimetres?
Because he measured them, he looked at it, he was concerned about it.
So, did he notice it with his naked eye, or did he happen to...
No, he noticed it with his naked eye. He noticed a lot of things with his naked eye.
So, he's got like a pile of ads, and he's going through them, one and then next, and then the next, and then the next, and he thinks, hang on, that one...
Attached to each ad is a schedule of advertising that says on this day, the Friday or the Saturday, we will have a 450mm ad in this newspaper. 450mm ad, he measured it out, it wasn't 450mm, it was 437 or 438mm total. That was enough to say, we must find out what's happening here. So I flew to Frankfurt with a piece of artwork, an ad was created, the metal plate was made, and indeed there was shrinkage, 3 or 4mm each side. At which point Stanley said, fine, I am now happy. We should think about doing ads some other way, Julian. They should think about doing ads photographically, not on metal plate. Talk about prescient, which is the way advertising is made right now.
And when he said, I'm happy now, was he happy now because he'd been proven right, or was he happy now because the ad was the right millimetre?
He'd learned something new, that does happen with ads.
He wasn't a fan of holidays, was he, or sort of downtime?
I don't think he ever understood what holidays were about. I remember once I was in France on holiday and desperate to go down to the beach with my wife and then young daughter, who was walking around our apartment with a bucket and spade ready to go. And the last thing I wanted to do was to tell Stanley, who was on the phone, you know, I've got to go now because we've got to go down to the beach, because he just wouldn't have got that, nor would he have appreciated, you know, that I was telling him this. But eventually the conversation went on for so long that my wife and daughter were making signs at me. I said, Stanley, I've got to go. Can I call you back later? And he said, well, where are you? I'm in France, Stanley. You're in France, right? And what are you doing there? I said, I'm on holiday. You're on holiday? I said, yeah, where? I told her I was in Cannes. You're in Cannes? Why? Why? And the conversation just went on and on and on. And then he asked me, what are you going to do there? I said, well, we're going to go down to the beach. And yeah. And I felt like I was such an idiot. I was going down to the beach to build sandcastles, and Stanley Kubrick is asking me to explain this, which I could not do. I just could not do.
Look at these photos I found. Kubrick was looking for the perfect sinister hat for the droogs to wear in A Clockwork Orange. How did he know when he had found the perfect sinister hat? I wonder if a man who was this obsessed with getting his work right was difficult to live with.
Who he was as a father isn't the same person as who he was on a film set or with colleagues. To me, he was my father. I never felt I dare not disobey him, ever. Which I'm absolutely certain if he was here, he would laugh out loud at the thought that I feared disobeying him.
Anya was a perfect match.
Please call up some sort of cat league or society or something like that, or a pet shop. Find out if they make any kind of collars that you can attach a little bell to keep the cat from killing too many birds, but will break away if the cat catches himself on a tree or branch instead of hanging the cat. Stanley was mightily preoccupied with the health and safety of his cats and dogs. In the end, we sort of made our own detachable collars. We bought in some regular collars and then sort of slit them and then joined them up with sort of easily breakable cotton.
Could he laugh at himself at this aspect of his personality?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, he would suddenly stop in his tracks and think, hold on a second, I mean, this is madness, or this is so silly.
And of course, it's this attitude that makes every frame of the films so special.
Well, exactly. I mean, if Stanley wasn't producing these memos, he wouldn't have produced the films that he produced.
Stanley always was very happy to have a new project he felt it was like studying a new subject entirely.
3.
Being an eternal student, he liked that, how much fun that is, getting all the material together. You're like a child then. And hence the huge archives with so many things in them.
But then, after Barry Lyndon, after he'd made a total of 9 films, years began to go by between movies. What was he doing in there? The boxes have the answer. Many of the 1,000 boxes Kubrick left behind are filled with his search for a story.
Intelligent kangaroo-shaped reptiles on another planet intrigue and impress a Catholic priest.
After a Holocaust has destroyed the Earth, some humans managed to escape to another planet called Gita. And there they found an entirely different civilization in which cannibalism is practiced.
A young man creeps through a crack on a quest for some golden worms, has many adventures, and finally makes it back to our own outside world with a herd of white horses and a girlfriend.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, Tony employed a team of readers in America. They read thousands of novels and sent daily reports back to England. They were frantically searching for the next Kubrick movie, but they didn't know it because they had no idea who Tony's boss was.
I formed a company called Empyrean Films, which Stanley thought sounded like some sort of, no-hope film production company that never quite got off the ground, He didn't want the readers to know who they were working for. It was run rather like a communist spy cell, nobody knew anybody else. We didn't have sort of social evenings where all the readers got together, and it was all run out of New York by Judy Toby.
Did you ever think to yourself, in those 20 years, well, what's he doing in there?
I did. I certainly had visual images of this hermit sitting there pouring through things, but I had no idea why it would take somebody that long, because previously he had been making movies,
one a year.
A year apart, and then it slowed down a bit, but maybe it was me.
I've got a bit of bad news though, Tony.
What's that?
I've just found one that you read, and you said that you didn't recommend it.
And it was subsequently filmed and became the biggest blockbuster in...
Yeah, have a look.
The Killing Fields by Bruce Robinson. My comments. The screenplay was boring to read. I kept flicking the pages to see how many more I had to read. The screenplay is very overwritten and contains lengthy descriptive passages.
He certainly was sad that he couldn't find a story he wanted to do. He was depressed, and he would start and read around and start this and do research on certain things and gave up. And he felt it was bad luck that he couldn't find what he wanted to do next.
What was he looking for when he was reading a book, or...?
The magic moment of falling in love with the story.
I suppose the downside of immersing yourself in the details comes when your thought process takes you to a place where the detail is impossible to take. There are boxes and boxes from the 80s filled with immense research for an eventually abandoned Holocaust film called Wartime Lies.
You almost lose your hold on life. It's so depressing. You don't want to do anything if you read enough of that stuff.
And yeah, not easy to even look through just those photographs.
No, you sit crumpled in the corner, you start to cry, and it's too awful. So that's why he gave that up. And I was very glad when he gave up. I didn't want to see another one of those books.
But there was a second reason why Wartime Lies never got made.
We did about 2 years pre-production. We built up a massive great archive of Poland, of the concentration camps, everything. And while we were doing this 2 years' worth of background research, of course Steven Spielberg came along, researched, shot, edited and released Schindler's List, which, as Stanley said, would have been a hard act to follow. So that was then abandoned.
So he went from the very beginning to the very end of Schindler's List in the amount of time it took you to amass.
Doing the research, yeah.
Isn't there a lesson there?
I don't think so. Because that was the way that Stanley made films.
I know one thing Kubrick was doing during those years. He was getting annoyed with the boxes. He thought the lids were too tight.
There was a company called G. Ryder up in Milton Keynes, and we phoned them up and spoke to them. And Stanley worked out what he thought was the optimum size for a box that was easy to handle, easy to store. Stanley figured, well, listen, you know, it can't be rocket science making a lid that's both snug, yet will lift off easily.
Did he actually sit down with a pen and paper and
worked out exactly what it was, yeah. It was the internal dimensions that we gave them, and then we Stanley then specified what thickness or micron of card that he wanted.
Obviously we had specific instructions, and it actually says on here, lid to be not too tight, not too loose, and then in capital letters, just perfect.
Do you want to give it a try? See if the dimensions worked?
As you can see, that lid comes off perfectly.
These are boxes that will, see us all out.
It's a lovely box. It's like the 2001 A Space Odyssey of boxes.
I found an internal memo in one of the boxes that, I don't know, the production chief at Ryder & Co. had sent to the floor manager on their letterhead. But the written on it was, let me get the words right, fussy customer, make sure the lids slide off properly. And Stanley found that terribly amusing. Yeah, I guess we were fussy customers as opposed to the customers who didn't mind spending all afternoon struggling trying to get a lid off.
He started staying in a lot more, so much so that the outside world no longer knew what he looked like, although he did go out quite frequently to the St. Albans branch of Ryman's.
He was just particularly fond of beautiful things that you buy in a stationery store, whether this is pads, notebooks, folders, inks. We had hundreds and hundreds of bottles of inks.
I mean, we could have opened a stationery superstore. I think Stanley had some sort of fear that one would eventually run out of stationery, so we had more stationery you can never imagine. And
there's still boxes full of old stationery from like ancient Rymans of days gone by.
Well, Stanley often used to joke that he was going to open a stationery nostalgia museum.
I suppose stationery collecting is the obvious hobby for a perfectionist, because what could be more flawless than stationery?
He would go to Ryman's and see whether they have something new.
And nobody knew what he looked like?
No, and he paid always cash. And he didn't want to use a credit card because he didn't want to disclose his name and get into awkward conversations. He found it uncomfortable to be asked, "Oh, are you Stanley Kubrick? Did you do 2001? What does the end mean? I didn't understand that." He liked the fact that he was not recognized easily. Not that he had given people lots of chances, because he didn't really go out much.
Well, you wouldn't need to in the places.
He loved it here. Yeah, people always sort of put the finger on him and saying, "Oh, well, this is such a strange guy sitting in his." He had a lovely time. People came to him.
I sometimes wonder what Kubrick would have made of this documentary. Jan says he thinks he would have been intrigued. He didn't throw anything away, and he would have liked the idea of someone years later trying to make sense of it all. In the end, 3 films were released in 19 years, including one in 1987.
There's a sort of random notebook he sort of carried round and would jot down odd notes in at odd times.
Will you read some of them out?
Let's see what we've got here. Include utter banalities.
You're a real comedian.
Well, they call me the Joker.
Well, I got a joke for you. I'm gonna tear you a new asshole.
Well, Pilgrim, only after you eat the peanuts out of my shit.
For months, I've noticed some old film cans on a shelf in the stable block. Nobody knows what's on them. They're just sitting there and have been for decades. They can't be outtakes because Kubrick had all his outtakes incinerated. They turn out to be 18 hours of footage that one of Kubrick's daughters, Vivian, shot on the set of Full Metal Jacket.
Robert? Yeah, let's see your position.
I never meet Vivian. She lives in Los Angeles now.
And we fucked around for an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, they all
we
moved
over here.
Then we had, I mean, I know it seems like a lot of tea breaks, but we had the tea break that was up at, over there. We had that when he did his knee.
You mean you had a tea break at 4 o'clock? And
No.
you have a tea break
Yeah.
at 6 o'clock?
No, this is a fresh tea break. He came up to me and said the tea's here.
No, but if you had a tea break at 4, you don't have to break for this tea break. This must just be a, you know, a complimentary tea break. If you broke for tea at 4, you don't have to break for tea at 6, at quarter to 7, then break it for a meal at 7:30. So figure it out.
I prefer to do around them all, because it gives me more fucking headaches, poxy tea breaks, and everything
I'll
else.
get them
I
back.
fucking sling them right down that fucking piss hole.
Right, Terry.
Right. Sort of memory you need, though, Stanley.
That's right. Now these two men are a little far apart. I think this last man should move up a bit. Well, why, Stanley? Space then.
Terry? In fact, there's quite a solid mass of people on the left now.
Let's stay there now. We're ready to get ready to shoot. You okay?
He died!
Cole?
This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun.
They should only do it when they say, "This is my gun." And then let go again. This is for fighting, this is for fun.
This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun.
Okay, one other thing. There's 3 beats on when you do it. It should be 3 shakes. This is my gun. No, in time to the thing. This is my rifle. This is my gun. This is for fighting. This is for fun. So give it 3, because a lot of people just still touch and go with what they're doing. Okay?
This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun.
It was around the time of the release of Full Metal Jacket that rumours of Kubrick's apparent eccentric, reclusive behaviour began appearing in the papers.
Quote, "We're hearing stories that suggest Kubrick is even more insane than psychiatrists had led us to believe. There's a thin line between being an artistic perfectionist and being a barking loon. Stanley has clearly crossed that line, and then some.
I tell a little to your left and stay there after you move. Okay, aim your gun.
He insists on eating all 3 courses of his dinner simultaneously in the manner of Napoleon, hates being driven faster than 35 miles per hour, and refuses to fly despite having a pilot's license.
Okay, so I'll yell fire when he hops over that concrete.
Stanley was not clinically insane, as Punch suggests. He was not insane. He was one of the smartest men who ever lived.
He felt it's gone wrong that I've stayed secretive.
Or private.
Private.
It's different.
Well, I'm using the press's term. You know, he's secretive. I'm not secretive. I just don't want, you know. What had been very understandable and, in fact, envied by many people who are in public life turned sour.
The truth is, Kubrick didn't need to go out because the whole world came to him, and the whole world was right here in 1,000 boxes on this estate. I've been coming to the Kubrick house for 5 years on and off, because that's how long it takes to look through 1,000 boxes. I suppose the closer you get to an enigma, the more explicable it becomes. Even the crazy-seeming stuff, like the filing of the fan letters by the town from which they came, makes sense after a while.
He thought, I may need a spy, I may need an agent in Albuquerque. So he had a name and number.
Well, like, we're thinking about showing, you know, they might be showing The Shining at the Albuquerque Odeon.
Yeah, and he
Will you
wanted
check it
to
out?
go down and check out the sound or check out the print or whatever. Or it could be something entirely different.
Yeah.
But he saw those as potential kind of agents in the field. You know, Stanley's irregulars.
It's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's been 9 years since Kubrick died. The estate is a very quiet place. But then, one day in 2007, the silence is broken. The boxes are leaving.
How are you feeling, Bernd?
Well, that's today, isn't it?
3, 5.
This is Bernd Eichhorn. He's a German archivist who's been living up at the Kubrick house for the past 4 years, archiving the boxes for the family. He's the only person other than me in the family to have lived with these boxes for that long.
Do you feel like your children are going off to university?
Not really university, they're leaving home forever.
Hello, Skylar.
Hello. I mean, when they go to university, they come back to clean their dirty clothes.
111.
They won't come back. I kept an eye on these boxes for 4 years nearly. Yes, 4 years now. So.
For Bernd and me, the stuff in these boxes are puzzles and curiosities. But for Christiane, there's something else.
I get very upset at seeing some of his old things because it's now old.
You know what? You're moving.
Polly Bob keeping his house gloves on it.
Also, I find old notebooks, because the paper is old and dusty and yellow, they begin to look so sad. You know, the person is so very dead once the paper is yellow. So, going through somebody's stuff is a very melancholy business.
Christiane says it's time to let go and move on, so they've donated the archive to the University of the Arts, London.
To just throw the stuff away would have been like burying Stanley again. It would have been terrifying to just say, okay, I don't need this anymore.
The boxes will be housed in a special climate-controlled facility in the Elephant and Castle, where film students and other students can come and look through them and learn how Kubrick's incredible attention to detail created images like these. One of the very last boxes I opened back at the Kubrick house contained a videotape. On the tape, Kubrick was addressing the camera and looking a bit nervous. The video was filmed by Leon Vitali, who was one of Kubrick's assistants. It's an acceptance speech made a few months before he died. He'd been awarded the D.W. Griffiths Award by the Directors Guild of America.
He really was a shy man. He was a shy man, you know. And to stand up in front of a camera, he put on a little blue blazer. And he also had a little bag where he had a comb and you know, a little mirror and what have you. And he called it his little actor's kit. It was all so sweet. I mean, you just wanted to hug him. It was so charming.
Good evening. I'm sorry not to be able to be with you tonight to receive this great honor of the D.W. Griffith Award. But I'm in London making Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And just about this time, I'm probably in the car on the way to the studio.
All this time, I suppose I've been searching for some kind of rosebud, some individual item in a box that contains the essence of Kubrick. And I think I found it in a few lines from this acceptance speech.
Anyone who has ever been privileged to direct a film also knows that although it can be like trying to write War and Peace in a bumper car in an amusement park, when you finally get it right, there are not many joys in life that can equal the feeling.
I think Kubrick knew he had the ability to make films of genius, and to do that, when most films are so bad, there has to be a method, and the method for him was precision and detail. I think these boxes contain the rhythm of genius.